Aloha Health Nuts! This one is about the power of agreements. By the end of this video, you will understand the difference between expectations and agreements, which is a really huge one. You'll have more clarity on the impact of breaking agreements individually, secretly, and socially. You will understand some more about building trust and integrity every day, and God forbid the opposite to that, right? And we're going to go over some details about crafting better agreements and even the meta agreement behind them. So let's kick off here with expectations versus agreements. There's a clear distinction between the two, although the lines often get a little bit fuzzy. Speaking of which, expectations are often unclear, they're unspoken most of the time. And that can be unspoken from our side, or maybe somebody else has unclear, unspoken expectations of how we are supposed to behave and whatnot. And you might only find out that you are not living up to somebody's expectations that were unspoken until it's a big upset thing, right? And then it's a tough situation because they're not very happy. They obviously are not appreciating what's going on at the moment, but there are no clear consequences because there was no agreements in place. Another way to frame this is that expectations have this demanding quality that the world should be a certain way, that people should be a certain way or whatnot. Inevitably, that is going to break down at some point, and that's why I call it setting up for upset. When that happens, if we are holding demands and expectations, then we're just going to be upset when they break. Have you noticed that expectations are one-sided? Expectations come from somebody and they go outwards, right? And it creates this situation which is pretty uncomfortable for everybody involved. It is not a very big win-win thing. And while there is some amount of accountability with expectations, it is a very weak type of accountability that is not very fun to be in. So if we want to get rid of all those negative things about expectations, we can basically replace them with agreements. And agreements have clear boundaries because they are defined. They have clear consequences if it is a good comprehensive agreement, that is. If this, then this, positive or negative, right? You can make an agreement that nobody else knows about. It's an internal agreement for your behavior, for instance. And it can also be between parties where both parties create the agreement together. Creating agreements is a skill that we can practice, and upholding agreements is also a habit and a practice that we can get better at. Now, the clarity of agreements are helpful for everybody, even if it is a secret, internal, individual agreement. I bet that's going to help you show up in the world better. So it's always going to be a win-win. But that does not mean it's going to be comfortable. In fact, the most powerful agreements can be very uncomfortable because they may be challenging us. They may be asking us to show up in a better way than we have ever showed up before. And I think that is a great thing, even though it can be uncomfortable. There's a huge difference between the demands and the expectations and the agreements or the promises, because when you live true to the agreement and you live true to the promise, there is appreciation there. There's something built. There's more trust there. There's more respect because you did what you said you would do, even if you are the only one that knows that. That is a very powerful thing. We're going to look at the implications of that later on. When you have a demand or an expectation and it is met, most people don't celebrate, right? It's just like flatline. It is neutral at best. But the agreements are actually positive and constructive. Now, in every sense, I think that agreements have more accountability. They have more power in general because they have clear consequences if you break the agreement. And you have clear positive outcomes for upholding the agreement. So they're double-sided on the motivation stack instead of expectations, which are kind of nasty, uncomfortable, unclear, and at best, neutral. All right, so leveraging the negative here, let's look at the impact of breaking agreements, personally and agreements with others. So let's say you broke an agreement that nobody else knew about. Breaking secret agreements, this rapidly diminishes trust in oneself. Even if nobody else knows about it and you think, oh, well, nobody else knows about it, I'll just break it, it doesn't matter. That is in effect saying that your opinion, your observation doesn't matter. And that is a huge dealio. When I realized this, man, I instantly took my agreements and my personal resolutions, even though nobody else would find out, way more seriously. And by treating yourself like you matter, guess what? I think you actually do build self-worth and self-respect in a healthy way there. Another huge and important and scary impact of breaking your personal agreements, it encourages the brain to figure out ways out of agreements and out of your goals in the future. If you are used to breaking goals all the time and not taking your agreements seriously and breaking promises and whatnot, then basically your brain goes, this is okay, it doesn't matter. And in the future, it's more likely to continue that. So as soon as possible, we want to get out of that habit of not taking ourselves seriously, not taking our agreements seriously, because otherwise that is going to compound negatively. Flip it around and let's say you never break your agreements, you always hit your goals to the best of your abilities. Then if your brain goes to that mission, it will figure out every way possible to make that a reality. It will not give up. The brain is very, very good at being set at a certain task. If that task is, how can I get out of this agreement, then the brain will be very good at it. If the task is, how can I make this goal happen no matter what, then the brain is also going to be very good at that. We want it to be the best servant possible, right? The brain, the mechanical mind, we want it to be the best servant possible. So make sure that we are training it to be better in the direction we want to every day. By now, it should be obvious that breaking personal agreements really promotes terrible self-worth. It wrecks inner confidence, and God knows the impact of that in everything that you do if you just don't have inner confidence to begin with. It also wrecks your holistic momentum in life to be making progress on all of those most important things in your goal stack. Now, I bet there are times when you think, well, breaking this one little personal agreement is not a big deal, right? Yeah, nobody knows about it. It's not going to impact you socially. What does it matter, really? And the truth is, it doesn't matter a whole lot this one little time. Let's say you committed to fasting for 15 hours or something, and you break that fast at the 12-hour mark instead. Nobody knows, but the implications of breaking any agreement in general, that is a huge deal. I'm not aware of anybody that is actually 100% perfect on following through 100% with all of their agreements. There are some very impressive individuals that are known for being extremely disciplined and following through with it no matter what, like David Goggins or whatnot. He said he would do a race. Well, he has broken ankles. He still was going to do that race. And he ran past the finish line with broken ankles still. And that is an example of upholding an agreement to the extreme, right? And there's benefits to that. Now, in that example, there might be a conflicting agreement of one agreement that you said you'd show up to this race and give it your best, and another agreement of maybe not wanting to make your injuries worse for like long-term health and whatnot. So at those points, you have to choose which one is the deeper priority. And hopefully your big toe in your goal stack makes that clear and obvious what the kind of the most important priority is and what that looks like to your daily action, so you can still feel like you're living in alignment, still know that you are living in alignment, even if you did break an agreement to not like run a race and hurt yourself worse, for instance. That's why I use the phrase like macro agreements, micro agreements. We want all of these to be as close to 100% as possible, because the closer we get to 100%, I think the benefits are exponential just for how we train our brain to work. As long as we are making the right agreements, we have the right intentions behind them. All right, let's go and get scared of breaking agreements with others. I think this is a healthy fear to have, because if we break agreements and other people know about it, this rapidly diminishes social trust and social status. It encourages others to really not take us seriously. What are the implications of this in your career, in your relationships and everything? If you break agreements or you break promises and other people know about it, whether it affected them or not, it wrecks the other person's confidence in our ability to do what we say we will do, right? Not what we want. If we do this enough, it leads to a rightfully deserved lack of social support from good people. You're probably only going to have other people surrounding you that also break their agreements. If we invert this, we get the phrase like, if we want to be around A players, then we have to be an A player. We have to be worthy of that social circle, right? Integrity inspires integrity. Degeneracy inspires degeneracy, which is why we want to be careful with our influences. The more people we surround ourselves that live with integrity, that uphold their agreements and their promises, the more we are likely to take ourselves and our agreements seriously as well and level up. Social circles matter. I know you know that already, but have you done that audit? Are you consciously removing yourself from unhelpful social circles and situations, and intentionally surrounding yourself with greater and greater A players. Now, just like with a personal little secret agreement, breaking it this one time might not be a huge deal unto itself, although it totally could be a huge deal unto itself as well, and it could destroy a key relationship instantly. I mean, even with yourself, if you break a really important agreement, then it could cause really, really bad things very, very fast. Even just the one little slip up, right? Its implications could be absolutely huge. Remember, the difference between 100% and 90% is of undefinable magnitude. We want to get as close to 100% as possible in all of the little micro agreements and the big macro agreements. Part 3 here, building trust and integrity every day. This is the inner work, because who we are being on the inside is primary. The external reality will take care of itself, but who we are being, that is what makes all the difference. Now, I liken this to a bird flying over a lake, because the bird is the bird, and it's flying, it's doing its thing. It pays no mind to the reflection that it is casting, to its shadow and whatnot. Those external things take care of themselves if we are focused on flying, of doing the inner work. Looking at the positive here, every time we keep an agreement and live in alignment with what is most important, I consider that day a victory. Our inner trust in ourselves goes up, as well as others' trust in ourselves goes up. That is a good deal. Every day we keep our agreements, we are probably creating a better external life as well. We are probably building positively compounding momentum. This is at least if we have the right agreements in the first place. We are improving our key skills, and every time that we keep an agreement and live in alignment with what is truly most important, at least to us, other people are going to notice eventually. Other people are going to respect us more. They're going to respect the power of our agreements more, because they know if you speak it into existence, it is extremely likely to happen. So they are aware of that and they're able to trust that. That is reputation there. And businesses know how important that is, the reputation of their brand, for instance. They do everything they can to keep that reputation as good as possible, because otherwise they may not be a functioning business anymore. Every time we break a promise, every time we act without integrity, we are psychologically putting our self-worth in the garbage. We are saying that we don't matter, that our opinion doesn't matter, that our observation doesn't matter. Well, I'm here to remind you that it does. Do you respect somebody that doesn't uphold their promises and live in alignment with their declared values? Whether it affects you or not, do you respect that person? Would you trust that person? Well, we are observing ourselves, and we are observing whether we uphold our own agreements and live in alignment with our own core values. Can you trust yourself? Do you respect yourself? I have faith that we are walking the way. It's a positive trend moving forwards. Whether we are doing well or maybe we messed up or something, we know we have the ability to change our ways moving forwards. And that's for positive or negative. That doesn't mean you can take a vacation just because you've been upholding your agreements for a long time. You know, oh man, I could change. I could end up breaking this agreement, so you stay vigilant. On the other hand, if you do mess up, if you haven't been keeping your agreements, then you know that you're capable of changing and living in alignment with those agreements. We want to get to a place that if we do break an agreement or break a commitment, it only comes from us living in greater alignment with the top level intention. And if that conflicts with the agreement, like in the running example, if you have broken ankles but you committed to doing this run, but running on broken ankles is going to cause a whole lot of other issues and you're going to need surgery, and it's just not aligned with your top level vision of health and fitness, which is why you signed up for the race in the first place, then the deeper commitment is going to be to do what is best for you for your health and fitness, not necessarily just run the race. So technically you broke an agreement, but you held the more important one. Now, especially when we are breaking agreements with other individuals, well, we can make it at least as honest, as harmless, and graceful as possible, especially for the others involved, but for ourselves as well. This brings us to section 4 here, which is crafting better agreements in the first place. Firstly, we want to be very careful with the agreements that we do make. We don't want to make them willy-nilly and then have to break them, right? That would be an example of a poor quality agreement. So let's only agree to things that are actually within our realm of responsibility and not vitally contingent on uncontrollable variables. Now that probably sounds pretty obvious, right? But I bet I'm not the only one that has made a promise or made an agreement or something that is honestly outside of what I'm personally responsible for. It may have happened by a stroke of luck, like everything worked out, but it could have not. And then I would have broken my agreement even though I did my very, very best or whatnot. That's why we need the right amount of specificity in the agreement. So that's why A, we concisely frame our most important process goals as agreements, not outcome goals. Because outcome goals, if they're like mine, they're huge and outlandish and they rely on a whole bunch of uncontrollable variables, and we're doing our very best, but it's the process goals that we are 100% responsible for that we can control. We can control our inputs. The outputs, not so much. B, we want to write this agreement down, put it in ink, and speak it out loud. If it is an agreement that is very important to you, I bet you will do that more than once, significantly more than once. And if it is extremely important, not just to you, but also others, then you will either create the agreement together and obviously speak it out loud then, put it down in writing then, or you can share your personal agreements with others for a boost in accountability that way. You can use your friends, you can use even like a social media account and whatnot by putting your agreement there and it's public. That way, if you break your agreement, there is negative social impact. And that works great for people that know that playing with high stakes inspires them to show up better. Part C is about the meta agreement behind them all. We need to acknowledge the meta agreement that we have. And you can create your own meta agreement about agreements, but it's probably going to be along the lines of something like this, which is I agree to live true to my agreements to the best of my abilities for as long as they are relevant and useful. If I slip up, I agree to forgive and move forwards with new awareness and new resolve. So this is the meta agreement behind all of the other agreements that we make. Hopefully there's something graceful in there about what happens when you aren't perfect with your agreements and how you can move forwards from there in a useful way. Because, like I said, I don't know anybody that is ever 100% on all of their agreements. And a lot of agreements only last for a certain amount of time and then it's like their season is over. And the vast majority of people do not actually consciously unagree to that and say this agreement is no longer relevant and useful. They just let it fade from memory. That is why it's useful to write down your agreements. You might have a database somewhere or a refrigerator or something where you have your agreements, your process goals. And when that is no longer relevant, then you see it on your fridge and maybe you're taking the box every day or whatnot. You say, okay, this isn't relevant anymore. You make a new one at the end of the quarter, for instance, and your agreements are probably going to be updated. You can consciously go through the process of, all right, I am not living under this agreement anymore. There's a better way. One more soundbite today. Let's actually be better than yesterday. We're not going to just try to be better than yesterday. We're actually going to make it happen. Are you trying anywhere? Are you trying to make better agreements? Are you trying to uphold those agreements? Or are you actually doing it better and better every day? And intentions are great, intentions are powerful, but that's not all that's going to happen, right? We are actually going to embody it in thought, word, and action to be better. All right, action steps for the day. Number 1 is craft your meta agreement. There are some prompts below if you want a little bit of guidance there. Action step number 2 is write down your agreements, your current agreements, or the ones that you are making today or tomorrow, whenever you do this in the future, and then put them somewhere that you see every day. I love the refrigerator door, especially if diet is something that you're really working on. If you have, your sheet, your whiteboard or something on your fridge, and you have to see that agreement of like, this is my fasting window and this is how much protein I eat every day or whatnot. Before you even open the fridge, then that is a very powerful spot. You're probably going to look at it almost every day regardless. Other common places are like the bathroom mirror. You can get a big sheet of paper or something or print one out and have your agreements there. The tracking part, I call it bonus points, but it's honestly a really, really important part. I don't want you to miss out on this. have some sort of either checkbox for the day or checkbox for the particular agreements, or even like a tally system. So you can simply just have your agreements listed out, for instance, on a line, and then every line, every day, or every time you execute that agreement, you just scratch a tally at the end of the day or whatnot. You can review that. And that way you build the momentum. You don't want to break the streak. And even if you were the only one that ever sees it, it is incredibly powerful. And if you take it seriously, you take yourself seriously, you take your own observations seriously, then that is going to build pretty much unstoppable momentum and steam over time. Unless you break it commonly, in which case it goes the other way. You take yourself less seriously. I know some of this sounds a little bit cheesy and whatnot, but it is not. It is extremely, extremely powerful. Or if you aren't taking it seriously, well, we talked about the psychological impact of that and the compound effect of that, of thinking that you don't matter and thinking that your own level of trustworthiness and your own confidence in yourself doesn't matter. Well, that's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So my name is Noah East with Holistic Synergistic. I'm sending you all the love you can handle, and I have faith that your powerful agreements will lead you to better and better places internally and externally. See you next time.